I don't know why I have a green folder. That might be a good sign. That's why she came. But thank you very much. I'm actually the General Secretary of the National Parent Teacher Association of Jamaica. And we have had some concerns and discussions among ourselves as to what it takes to educate a child in Jamaica. And we think the government has, been playing around since 2016 with what is free education. The reality is, and we as parents recognize this, education is not free. Somebody has to pay. And if the government isn't paying, then the parents have to pay. And, if you pay, as we always have a little saying at the office, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So if we don't invest in education, we are not going to get the results that we need. I had done a little typical high school, which I'd ask you to vet for me, and Lindburn to vet for me, giving an idea of what the costs are of educating a child. The minister is here. Welcome. Pleasure. Yeah, so we had done a basic costing of a budget for this September, because we actually have our AGM on the 25th of September of this year. So we have been working on the cost of educating a child for us to present at that AGM. Well, it was delayed from July, so we had worked it out. And when we worked out the cost of, say, an average high school with about 1,200 students, it's about 90 million. When I say costing, I'm excluding teacher's salary, bursar's salary, things that the ministry normally takes care of. So I'm not including those in the numbers, just basic operational costs for the school. It's about $90 million to run a school of, say, 1,200 kids now. And we're talking about, classroom expenses like classroom furniture, the various extracurricular activities that the kids have, computers, which is now a big expense, and the internet for a lot of schools is now a huge expense. PE, general class materials, printing, photocopying. I saw a budget the other day for a school with the printing costs, because it was weird. Almost every teacher had a printer, or every department had a printer. And a friend of mine was asked to look at it, and he shared the cost with me because he knows I'm hunting information. And it was crazy. I mean, that school spent almost $6 million a year on just printing. Now, the truth is, how much of that is schools printing? Because sometimes we know some of the teachers do a little thing. So we know those are little costs that the schools incur, but are not direct costs for the school. But the system that he was putting in place would mean that each time a teacher or anybody prints something, it is pretty clear who's coming from and what they're printing for which department, everything like that. And he was cutting their costs by 50% based on just monitoring the number of printing pages and keeping everything intact. Science equipment and material. I mean, we might think, okay, what does a thermometer cost now? What does a pipette cost? What does a beaker cost? Things like those, it costs a lot of money. Sports is, depending on which sporting activities, it can go from a low of $2 million to some of these Manning Cup and the Costa Cup teams, which are like $25 million being spent. Schools Challenge and other competitions, debating, are also costs. But these things enhance the children. We want our children to be involved in these things. So we as parents are supportive of these things. But those are a cost which the school has to incur. You have things where teachers go off on vacation, and to get the replacement teacher or a temporary teacher, there's a cost attached to that as well. And I know some of the principals here know their hands are tied as to how much they can spend and who they can bring in. And if your child is used to a teacher who is this good, as far as they're concerned, and they get somebody who is here, it impacts how they learn. It impacts when they come home and say, Mommy, today I didn't feel like I was being motivated at school. And one of the things, and God rest her soul, Sister Angela always said, she says, Mr. Mayne, my biggest problem is how to keep these bright girls motivated. Because kids who are bright get into more trouble because their minds are constantly working, right, man? She would tell you, their minds are constantly working. And, STGC is here as well. Yeah, their minds are constantly working. So we have to find a way to keep them occupied and become productive in school. So that's why we have all these extracurricular activities. You have the management of the plant, the school maintenance, repairs to the school. Immaculate had a pool. I actually learned what the cost of a thing of chlorine was, which actually blew me away. Apparently $100,000 for it, that barrel of chlorine that they put in there. So it's a lot of money. And just school grounds. A school like Clarendon College, which is over 100 acres of land, is expensive to maintain and secure. You're looking at security costs. So all those costs, you're looking at just travel for the principals to various meetings with the ministry and all over the island and stuff. A bike, if they have a bike, if they have a school bus, a car for the principal for maintenance, all those sort of things. And of course, JPS bill. The JPS bill is huge. Water bill, significant figures, and garbage. So these are all the things that a principal and a board have to think about in getting a school to run. And as I said, for an average school of about 1,200, average high school of about 1,200 kids, we're looking at $90 million. Now, the numbers, the Ministry of Education gives $19,000 per student, which if you're looking at 1,200 kids, that's 22.8 million. In this particular thing that I did, we assumed 25% of the kids were on path. I mean, there are schools who are lower, schools who are, I think I heard a school down in St. James, I can't remember the name of the school just now, but it was like 60% was on path. So, it's significant. It varies, huge gaps between which kids are on path. But in this case, I used 25%, which means that 300 kids at $2,000 was 600,000. Then the ministry gives part-time salaries, which is about six point something million. And then for ICT and for STEM, that's about another 9 million. So we end up with about $48 million from the ministry towards the 90 million. So we're left with $52 million that has to be funded. Parents are not, and I'm telling you this, and Minister, parents are not going to voluntarily pay that money. It has to have a factor attached to it to make them feel that it is obligatory. I mean, I've seen, and this is because I also party a lot, parents who don't want to pay school fees when I was at Immaculate, but they're at every soca fete. No, what's the priority? We have to establish. We have parents who are paying $30,000. Mommy is $30,000 so they're here. Dad is, doing manicure, pedicure, and all those kind of things, but are not looking at their school fees. My parents made huge sacrifices for my education at Manchester High. Huge, until free education came in. And even then, we still had to deal with transportation and some of the books and all those kind of things. So we have costs that we, as parents, know have to be paid. And at the end of the day, it boils down to what does it really cost to educate a child in Jamaica today? And using this particular model, it's about $75,600 a year. That's what it costs. Which means, based on the proposal that we have here, of $52 million to be paid by parents, or wherever it's going to come from, it's going to be about $43,000 for each child to pay, on average. Now, tell me I'm wrong, and in speaking to parents in the various regions, they tell me the problems they're having. But when I put the numbers down to them, they look at me and they go, well, Mr. Mayne, that's not so bad. But when you divide 43,000 by 3, it's $12,000, $14,000 a term. Just remember this, $14,000 a term. I had a gentleman who worked at KFC who was in the meeting we were in. He said, Mr. Mayne, I can afford that. He works at KFC. I mean, not because my brother is married to the Myers, but he just came up and spoke and he said, he can afford that. So we need to look at the numbers and be realistic as parents, because we are being realistic about it. These are the real numbers, these are the real costs. And if we get 85% of the parents to contribute towards it, it would go far away in helping the final product that we get from the schools, the results, and the grades will go up. Because each one teach one, and each child that gets better, they will reach down and help somebody else. You know, I have 3 young men that I helped at Manchester High School. One was in 2019, he was a Rhodes Scholar. And I got a call when he was in 3rd form. Mr. Mayne, this child needs help, blah, blah, blah. So of course I just went down, what is the cost? A couple of my friends reached out, we paid for everything. And the one thing he didn't share with us is how did he pay for lunch and transportation. And for 4 years we paid for everything up, but it just never occurred to us to ask. And you know how he paid for lunch and transportation? He picked up bottles in Christiana Market and sold them. So he'd leave school early on Friday and be in Christiana Market at 3 o'clock, picking up bottles, all of Friday evening, all of Saturday, to find taxi fare for that week to come to school. How do you feel? You know, these are the things that you say, yes, it is hard, but if they get a lot of help on one part and just a little part for their contribution, it makes a difference to that child when they have reached where they want to go. Another young man, he's a medical doctor now, same thing. I mean, his mom said, Mr. Mayne, I can't find the next dollar to pay for med school. I said, Mommy, don't worry about it. Send him to go up to student's loan, I guarantee the loan. When he did his first semester of exams, and I showed my daughter's a doctor, and I showed her the grades. She said, Daddy, that's impossible. He got all distinctions. He got a scholarship. Student loan was gone. So, you know, we as parents know what the children possess, but we need to get them through high school at a reasonable price and with support from the government ministry and from corporate Jamaica and everything else. But education is not free. And we as parents recognize that. We have been getting support from all 7 regions of the country, understanding that education is not free. And this is why, as one parent said to me, I said, Mr. Mayne, this is why I pushed so hard for my child to get into Glenmuir. Because it was like, Mr. Mayne, if they don't get into Glenmuir, they can't get a good job. It's a domino effect as far as most parents see it, which is why they push towards the traditional schools. So what you're left with is some schools being left behind. I think the term is a term now obsolete, right, sir? Right. But there are schools being left behind because they are not getting the funding to deliver on education. Because the Alumni Association can do so much and no more. And even that is another headache with alumni, because you have people with egos this big and people who just want to get the work done. And it's always a hard thing to fill that gap between, you know, a person wants to be in picture with the principal and post it on social media, as against somebody who's going to give $1 million and they say, Donovan, don't call my name. You know, so those are the things that we know as parents, and we accept that we also accept that our teachers, and you all saw the news recently, we lost quite a few teachers. The thing is, who do we replace them with? Who's going to replace a teacher, a head of department, with years of experience, years of knowledge? I mean, we have junior people coming behind them, but can they fill the gap to maintain the level at which that particular school is operating? So at the end of the day, our children are going to lose out. So we understand that there's a cost to education, and we as the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica will be a part of the push to help parents to pay. But we know, I mean, I think the time when there were something about, you know, auxiliary fees and students being locked out, at the time when I did the investigation, there were like 7 instances. So, you know, we can't continue to say it's free education. Education is not free. Somebody has to pay, and we as parents are prepared to pay.